On Tech News Today, the Chinese market for smartphones takes a dive even as Apple takes over. Plus, self-driving cars crash more than they say, but they're still way safer than human drivers. And the record for downloading a TV show has been shattered in the past 24 hours. We'll tell you all about it on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, May 11th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Prosper. Prosper is a peer-to-peer lending marketplace that connects people who are looking to borrow money with those who have money to lend. Visit prosper.com/twit and receive a $50 Visa gift card when you get a loan. And by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. My name is Mike Elgan. Our co-anchor today is CNET Editor-in-Chief Lindsey Turrentine. Hello, Lindsey. How the heck are you?
I'm great. I think like the rest of the world, or the rest of this world, recovering from a Mother's Day no tech hangover.
So you're feeling good? You're feeling high energy today? I need to know.
I am.
Okay.
I am feeling good.
Good, because we have somebody in our studio audience who listens to this show at 2 speed, like 2x. You know how on the podcasting app you can turn it up. And so we're going to put him to sleep if we talk at normal speed. So we have to talk at twice the speed we normally do for our studio audience. Do you think we can do that? Oh my gosh.
I think I'll try.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do the show.
Okay.
All right, well, our top story today, China's smartphone market appears to be saturated. Shipments in the country fell 4.3% in the first quarter compared with the year-ago quarter. The news comes from a new survey released today by IDC. The slowdown was caused by the fact that the market for first-time buyers has shrunk to nearly nothing, actually. Almost everyone in China who wants a smartphone already has one. IDC also reported that Apple has the highest market share in China. We've heard that before. And that they reported 15% market share for Apple. And that's followed by, and following Apple is China's own Xiaomi and Huawei for second and third place. Samsung, tragically, their market share has been cut in half, and then now the company is the #4 smartphone seller in China. Of course, they used to dominate that market. Lindsey Turrentine, this is a really interesting turn of events. We don't normally, normally you don't report anything shrinking in China ever.
It's true, and what I thought was interesting is that the managing director of IDC in China said, usually people think of China as a developing market, but it's not really when it comes to smartphones. And I was a little bit surprised to hear her say that people do think about China that way, because China's been really active in this space for a long time. And the fact that you've even seen such changes for the fortunes of like a Samsung that was so dominant, things have changed so quickly, to me suggests that this has been a pretty sophisticated market for quite some time. And that, China, look out, because a lot of decisions that are going to be made about technology are going to be made because of how it will perform in China, especially with this kind of market saturation.
Yes, and it's also, there's so much here to talk about, but one of the interesting stories is that China has also, you talk about it having a reputation as an emerging market. Apple's the #1 company there. That means that people are paying Apple prices, and of course, iPhones are even more expensive in China than they are in, say, the United States. And the percentage of the income that people pay often in China for an iPhone is vastly higher than what it is in the United States. The other interesting part of this is that for a long time, China as a country, as an economic entity, is kind of weird, because they have a group of people who are about equal to the population of the United States, who are middle class, upper middle class, and very wealthy, right? And then they have, a huge, vastly larger segment of the country, mostly in the eastern half of the country, or western half of the country, who are essentially third world levels of economic development and so on. So it's like multiple countries within one country. And so those people, even out in the sticks, have gotten their first phone. And analysts are saying that they're going to probably hang on to their smartphones for 2 or 3 or 4 years. So I think these numbers are going to continue to drop within China as those first-time buyers, now that they have a smartphone, they're not going to cycle it over in a year or two like a typical user would in the United States or Europe. So this is going to be really interesting to see. And of course, everything is changing in China. China is the big manufacturing hub, and it's becoming more difficult to hire people in China, skilled labor, the kind that made China the manufacturing powerhouse that it is. And so wages are going up. So everything is changing in China. It's really interesting to see.
What's really interesting to me about this report, and I don't know exactly what it looks like in the US, but we've got the top 5 players here in the smartphone manufacturing and sales numbers in China are Apple, then Xiaomi, then Huawei, then Samsung, then Lenovo. But others, so companies that are not any of those 5, are almost 42% of shipments in China.
Yeah.
And over 42% of the market share. That's kind of crazy. There are a lot of other manufacturers playing a big role in China. And because that population is so large, I see that as a huge opportunity, even with smartphone sales shrinking for lesser brands that we probably don't even talk about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, of course, one of the things that's driving that is the fact that there are so many small Chinese manufacturers that we've never even discussed on the show. There are dozens and dozens. It's a place where there's a lot of new entrants in the market in the last couple of years. And so, that's going to shake out. That's going to shake out. And I'm guessing that, like everywhere else in the world, that's going to be whittled down to a few dozen, down to a dozen, down to 6 or 7 major manufacturers within China. So, again, that market is changing very, very quickly. And, as prices drop, people are gravitating away from the low price phones, and they all want, lots and lots of people want iPhones and Xiaomi phones. Xiaomi is a very coveted brand within China as well, like the iPhone is. So really interesting development there in China. Well, we got some more news for you in just a second, but first let's talk about the best way to borrow money. Prosper, one of our sponsors today, will let you borrow up to $35,000 in as few as 5 days. You don't want to go to the bank. You don't want to borrow from relatives. You want to do it the Silicon Valley way, which is prosper.com. You can pay off high-rate credit cards. Great idea. Much better than getting into more credit card debt. You can fix up your house and even boost your business. And Prosper's online marketplace connects people who need money with those who want to invest. The people who put up the money are essentially investing in you and your project. It's really an interesting model, and you got to check it out at prosper.com/twit. They've actually serviced more than $2 billion in funded loans. Check your low rate instantly, and it won't affect your good credit. Go to prosper.com/twit. And now, for a limited time, Prosper is offering Twit viewers and listeners a $50 Visa gift card with your low-interest loan. You can get up to a $35,000 loan in your account in as few as 5 days, and a $50 Visa gift card. Go to prosper.com/twit for their special offer just for Twit fans. Apple has embarked on a long-term goal to be 100% reliant on renewable energy for all of its operations, including manufacturing. CEO Tim Cook claims that it already generates the equivalent of 87% of its energy from solar, wind, biogas, fuel cells, geothermal power, and hydropower. Also, Apple yesterday announced a partnership with the World Wildlife Fund to protect up to 1 million acres of forests in China, which will also produce fiber for pulp, paper, and wood products that Apple sells. Apple announced a similar plan last month for forests in Maine and North Carolina. This is kind of impressive because not a whole lot of people do this kind of thing in China. It's kind of a new thing in China. People just, they have a very dirty fuel economy in China, and a lot of people are suffering the health effects of that, and they desperately need renewable energy sources in China, and it looks like Apple is trying hard to do something really interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they are committing, even in the long term, to bring 100% renewable energy to its supply chain seems almost impossible to enforce, although Apple has clearly so much power, and we just saw the numbers. Apple sells more smartphones in China than any other manufacturer, but their supply chain, I mean, we know that Apple outsources manufacturing to a lot of different companies in China in a lot of different places. China is physically gigantic, so just visiting plants around the country is probably a challenge to make sure that they're compliant with this. But on the other hand, if Apple is seeing great sales in China and seeing potentially sales in China are more important than sales in the United States, it has to protect its own market. If people are unhealthy or become angry about this in China over the long term, they're not going to want to buy these products, and they're going to blame Apple. So I think it's obviously the right thing to do, but it's also very smart.
It is smart. And what I'm impressed by is that they are protecting 1 million acres of forest. How do you find 1 million acres of forest in a country with 1.4 billion people? It would seem to me that that forests that could be used for harvesting in a sustainable way, wood products, would be more expensive, more difficult, more difficult to reach, and so on. With a country with so many people, it's just hard to imagine. I mean, it's one thing to find native forests in Maine, in South Carolina, but in China, that's got to be harder to do. So that's really interesting to see how they go about doing that.
Well, China has so much population in urban centers, and population is actually leaving rural areas and moving into urban centers. I think that once you get outside of big cities in China, and heavens knows there are a lot of those cities that we don't even talk about, but it's just a giant place, and there's a lot of countryside too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just reading some stats here on China's population. The population density in China is 145 people per square kilometer.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But as you said, people are stacked up in Shanghai and other major urban areas. Well, the Associated Press reports in an exclusive that 4 out of the 48 self-driving cars in California have been involved in car accidents since September, accidents that have not been voluntarily disclosed by the companies involved. 2 of the accidents took place when the self-driving technology was in control, and 2 when human drivers were in control. 3 of the accidents were Google cars, and 1 was a Delphi automotive test vehicle. All of the accidents were caused by other people, not the companies doing the self-driving technology, and all of them were minor, involving speeds under 10 miles an hour. Now, this is being presented in both the headline and also to a certain extent in the article as, hey, self-driving cars aren't as safe as we thought. But this, to me, makes it clear that they are very safe. This is a tiny accident rate. Out of 48 cars driving for since September, okay, so that's not a whole lot of time, but since September, 48 cars have been involved in no injuries, only 4 minor accidents. That seems to me like a pretty good sort of record.
Well, it's interesting. This is sort of addressed toward the bottom of this article, and the Wall Street Journal reports that the national rate for reported property damage only crashes, so these small, no one got hurt crashes, is about 0.3 per 100,000 miles driven. And so in that context, Google's 3 in 140,000 seems kind of high. But the difference here is that most people, when they have small, slow crashes, probably don't report it. They'd rather not report it, and they'd rather not tell their insurance company. So you may be right, although the numbers don't look so great.
To me, what jumps out is that, yes, the rate of being involved in an accident is comparable. The number of accidents caused by the self-driving car technology is 0. So if you take any number of accidents, for human drivers and add it up, you're not going to get a 0 rate of accidents. I mean, they're not causing car accidents. That's the important thing. I mean, yeah, somebody can plow into any car no matter what or who is driving. But I personally think that this demonstrates that, 0 causing of accidents, that's pretty good. That's better than human drivers, if you ask me.
Certainly. It's amazing. I think this all just comes back to the fact that we're going to have really real conversations about who's at fault or who gets sued when something goes wrong. And how are we going to always, is there going to be inherent proof that a self-driving car is not wrong in the legal system? It's a really interesting conversation.
That's a great point. I've written columns on this before because it kind of bugs me that, I think that texting and driving, which you should never do, ever do. And I think that people tend to be, oftentimes irresponsible with texting and calling and phones and driving in general. However, I think that the vast majority, I think that way too much blame is being given for car accidents based on texting and driving. For example, if there's a car accident and the police or the authorities determine that a phone was being used during that accident, the accident is always blamed on the use of that phone, right? So if you're eating a sandwich and distracted by your sandwich and you get in an accident and your phone is also running, they'll blame the phone, not the same. See what I'm saying? It's like there's a bias against the use of phones in cars that skews the blame toward the technology. And what I always point to is if you look at the rate of accidents, we've moved in the last 20 years from a world in which 0 people were using smartphones in their cars to almost everybody has smartphones in their cars and many people using them. And if they caused a lot of accidents, the accident rate should go up, right? But the accident rate has gone way down for another number of factors not related to smartphones. So where are all those car accidents that are being caused? I think that distracted drivers cause car accidents. And a smartphone is going to distract you. But if you didn't have that, you'd be distracted by something else. People put on makeup in their car. People, do all kinds of crazy, they read in their cars. I've seen it.
Sure.
And so, distracted drivers are what's dangerous. And just because the distraction du jour is a smartphone doesn't mean the technology is to blame. That's all I'm saying. So.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the problem always comes down to people who allow their brains to go somewhere else. And that can happen if you're looking off a bridge at a boat in the bay and you slam into the back of the car in front of you, or it can happen if you're reading your email. You're absolutely right. I think that people get concerned because it's so prevalent. It's so easy to drive around and see people,
Yeah. Yep.
looking down, not driving through stoplights. And because we only have these sort of anecdotal experiences with people getting distracted, it's easy to point fingers. I don't know. We could talk about this for hours. The concept of having a self-driving car that can prevent you from doing that is great and wonderful. Do people still even need to know how to drive? Will they need to know how to drive? I don't know, but I think you're right. This is pretty good news, all things considered.
Yeah, I think so. Well, in a follow-up, we told you April 24th that Google's Android mascot, the Android robot, was discovered in Google's map of Pakistan urinating on the Apple logo. The image was sneaked into Google Maps in the form of multiple public parts submitted over time. They had these different shapes that eventually added up to this image, but each one of them just looked like a random shape. And they did this with Google's Map Maker. Now, Google is shutting down Map Maker starting tomorrow because the Google Maps team is apparently overwhelmed by submissions to review. They'll probably bring the service back up once they've caught up. But Lindsey Turrentine, there's some chatter about this that says that after this hack, if you will, this defacement of Google Maps was discovered, lots and lots of people have been trying to do the same thing. And so the submissions to the Map Maker have gone through the roof, and it's caused Google to be overwhelmed. And in addition to that, they've decided they need to check things more carefully, apparently.
Well, I am super bummed because I was trying to carve my initials into a South of Market park. And now it's never. No, I'm joking. I'm sure that's the case, but I also kind of wonder if instead of needing time to look at all the submissions, Google's just kind of shutting this down for a while until people forget about it.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, never mind. I'm not going to try to draw, whatever, my alma mater's logo on the side of a mountain.
Yeah. Although when it comes back, I'm sure people are planning and scheming how they're going to get around it next time. So we can look forward to more awesome defacements. Well, in product update news, Facebook is testing a new feature for linking to content in their mobile app. The feature is called Add a Link, and it enables you to search for and share content that has been already shared by others on Facebook without resorting to one of those pesky search engines. This is another attack on Google, Lindsey Turrentine. They're basically figuring out a way, suddenly Facebook is all into avoiding search. It's already a terrible place to search for content now, but now they're enabling you to share content through a kind of search without ever having to go to Google, find the link, and then come back and share it.
I think it's genius. I mean, honestly, how often do you see something in Facebook and kind of want to remember it and then can't find it again, and then you go to Google? They want that to stop, right? Yeah. Facebook wants you to associate all the interesting things you've read with them.
Yep. They want you to never leave Facebook.
But I think I don't even think it's a bad idea. I think for me personally as a user, this sounds handy.
Yeah.
I like it.
It absolutely does. We got some big numbers for you in just a minute, but first let's talk about hiring. ZipRecruiter is one of our sponsors today, and it is the best place to go when you want to hire people. You can post to 100 plus job sites with a single click. Plus, you can post to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Google+. You can specifically decide which of the social networks you're going to post to, and you can even automatically tweet every single job you post. Just post once, and within 24 hours, your candidates will roll into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface, and best of all, they will help you sort the most qualified candidates from the least, so you don't spend all of your time slogging through unqualified candidates. It's a fantastic way to cast the widest possible net and then not waste your time in going through the candidates. You know, hiring people is the most important decision your business will ever make, or your department, and so you want to do it right with ZipRecruiter. They've been used by more than 400,000 businesses, and they've delivered more than 53 million candidate applications. You got to find out why. Try ZipRecruiter today with a free 4-day trial and get your perfect candidate before they go to somebody else by going to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Check it out. Even if you're not hiring at this moment, you got to check this out right now to see what's possible on ZipRecruiter. Big numbers for you. The first big number is a really big number, $50 billion. That's how many dollars Uber will be worth if it successfully executes its plan to raise $1.5 billion in a new funding round, according to Bloomberg News. You know, my son and I were talking about this yesterday, Lindsey. Uber's valuation is just insane. It's an app that arranges rides. Like, what? $50 billion? That's crazy. Another big number for you today, 2.2 million. That's how many times last night's episode of Game of Thrones was illegally downloaded in the first 12 hours after it aired on TV, according to the piracy tracking firm Exipio. This apparently is a new record. You know, Lindsey Turrentine, what is it about Game of Thrones that makes people want to pirate it?
Well, they want to be part of it. And I think that Game of Thrones is so different from the rest of HBO content, which is all pretty amazing, to be honest. But this stands out. It's great for people who love historical drama. It's great for people who love science fiction and fantasy. And I think that because it's such a different genre and because it's such a cultural phenomenon, there are a lot of people out there who only want to be involved in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and I think
not the rest of HBO.
Yeah, I would guess also that it's an international phenomenon. And of course, HBO is just in the US, isn't it?
I think that you can find ways to get it elsewhere, but none of them are legal. And yeah, I mean, if you want to watch this anywhere else, I know that when I travel with HBO, I can't watch it elsewhere.
Yeah. Tragic.
It's frustrating.
Yeah. Well, in news you can lose, about a year ago, a maker named Kevin Bates created a business card for himself that was actually a playable mobile video game console. The reaction was so huge that he moved to China to perfect a manufacturing process that enables you to buy them for yourself for $29 each. It's called the Ardu Boy, and he's launching a Kickstarter campaign. And it's open source, too. You can create games for it or port existing games into it. Lindsey Turrentine, I'm definitely backing this one. This looks crazy. Look at that.
It's really, really fun. I can't imagine actually using this as your business card, but using it as a fun way to learn some of this technology, and for kids especially, it seems great.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't pass it out the way I pass out business cards today, but, you know, if I met Elon Musk, I'd be like, here, give me a call sometime,
absolutely.
Elon. And then
although he wouldn't have time to play your little game.
Yeah, or he might reprogram it to launch into space or something like that, or run on his Tesla battery. Well, we got some feedback from Christine Julian, who emailed us about a report Friday that said 2.1 million people still pay for AOL's 56 kilobit per second modem dial-up service to connect to the internet. And of course, Christina Warren, our co-anchor on that day, she and I were just saying, oh, this is terrible. They're really ripping off all these people. The people don't know they're paying for it and all this kind of stuff. But Christine actually sent a really interesting note to us. And here's what she said. I was a paying AOL customer until April of this year. I decided to end the paid account when they announced a new price increase. I've had the account for nearly 20 years. I have been on DSL for nearly 10 years, but knowingly maintain an AOL dial-up account as a backup in much the same way I keep a corded phone for use when the power goes out. I have an older laptop with a dial-up modem that I used when my DSL was not available, or I was traveling and my motel or friend's home did not have internet access available. I still use an old AOL email address because of the many years I've spent establishing it as the point of contact for several projects. That makes a lot of sense. It makes sense to always have as your backup to be the low-tech version of what's going on. And of course, we all find ourselves in situations where we don't have internet access, but we do have a phone connection. So it's pretty old school, but I guess that really works. Although I couldn't imagine accessing the internet at 56 kilobits per second, even though I've done it long ago.
I think this is really smart, but I'm also amazed that her dial-up modem still works.
Yeah.
What happens when that thing dies? Can you find those still? Does Radio Shack sell Dial-up modems? I'm fascinated.
I have no idea, but if you know whether you can still buy dial-up modems, send us email to tnt@twit.tv. We're curious to know if they can be purchased, and if so, do they still work? Do you need an acoustic coupler? I've completely lost my dial-up modem mojo here, so help me out. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Chris Peachman in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who posted this picture on Twitter. He watches TNT on his Windows 10 powered Surface Pro. Plus, if you look in the upper corners, he uses a product called Ears for the Surface Pro, which started out as a Kickstarter project. They're little plastic ears that basically magnify and direct the sound to make it louder.
Huh.
Very cool. And it was started out as a Kickstarter project, but now you can buy them on Amazon and elsewhere. So they're, it's like $10 or something like that. Very brilliant low-tech solution. Well, show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. Lindsey Turrentine, what the heck are you working on these days? When is the next print edition of CNET coming out? And where can people read your stuff?
Well, the next print edition of the magazine is coming out in July. So look for it then. It's going to be an exciting edition. We've got a lot of fun stuff that we're working on for it right this second. Everything else you can read at cnet.com.
Very, very cool. And of course, you can follow Lindsey at Turrentine on Twitter. Thanks for joining us, Lindsey. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on your podcasting app, of course, and listen to it at double speed for twice the podcast that you can cram into your day. You can also choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT, and you can watch us live every weekday at 1800 Zulu time at live.twit.tv. If you ever take a trip to San Francisco, come on up and watch us as part of our studio audience. Just send email to tickets@twit.tv before you come up. If you'd like to help us grow our audience, here's how you can do it. Just post a link to twit.tv/TNT on the social media site of your choice and tag 3 friends you think might like the show along with your recommendation to subscribe. And you can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Elgan. Also, don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. This show was produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.